So in some of these videos, John's thrown around some lingo that not everybody knows, especially if you're brand new to photography. So what is a crop sensor camera?
So first off, let me start off by saying that if I say any words that you don't understand, don't be embarrassed or ashamed to ask in the comment section, what is this? You know, I realize that I've reached a level in my photography where I just talk about things as if I assume that everybody understands them.
I have to catch him all the time because I start getting the deer in the headlight look.
Yeah. It's just the nature of having worked, you know, full time in this business now for a little over 7 years.
It's like learning a new language.
It really is like learning a new language. And anything that I don't touch on here, I would highly encourage you to follow a lot of other photographers out there. And one that I can specifically recommend, specifically on this topic, is my friend Boo-Ray Perry. Just look up Boo-Ray, Booray, Perry. He's the only one that I know of in existence on this earth. Very awesome guy. He has a YouTube channel. He's a Fuji shooter. We won't hold that against him. He is an avid Fuji shooter. But he has done a full video series on YouTube about a lot of this different lingo and stuff like that.
And he explains it really well.
And he's been a full-time pro in this industry a lot longer than I have too. So he has a lot of really cool knowledge. So crop sensor, we'll start with crop sensor. All right, so in your cameras these days, the size of your sensor is going to determine a lot in terms of image quality and image size. So it can get very confusing when you start talking about megapixels and crop sensors and things like that. But a good rule of thumb is the larger the sensor, the better the image quality.
And very briefly, the sensor, in case anybody doesn't know, is when the shutter opens, the sensor is what's taking the light in. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah, so yeah, the sensor is the little electronic piece that's mounted in the camera that captures all of that information. Yeah. That's what exposes. The sensor is basically your digital film.
There you go.
These days.
There you go. Yeah.
It's what captures the light and exposes the image. And you know, everything has an image sensor in it these days. The camera that we're shooting on right now, which is the Osmo Pocket, it has I want to say it has a 1-inch sensor. I think it does have a 1-inch sensor. Our cell phones have sensors in them. They're very tiny, but that's where, you know, a lot of these cell phone manufacturers get into this race with megapixels, and Samsung's like, we have a 200 megapixel sensor. Well, that's great, but your sensor is only this big. So when you start cramming that many megapixels into a sensor that's that small, that's why the image quality just doesn't hold up. And so
to expand the phone.
Right. So that's why, and you've heard me talk about this many a times, where in a previous video I was talking about the Z6 II and the Z7 II, right? The Z6 II and the Z7 II are both full frame sensors, but the Z7 II is 45 megapixels. The Z6 II is 24. So when it comes to low light sensitivity, the Z6 II actually outperforms the Z7 II because it has fewer megapixels on fewer sensor sites on a larger sensor. Full frame is the size of a 35 millimeter piece of film. And that was the industry standard, kind of where they went with that, because that was, you know, going from the film to the digital days, that was what the size of the image sensor ended up being. So if you look at an old 35 millimeter piece of film, that's the size of a full frame sensor. So anything above or below that has some type of what they would call a crop factor. So when you move into a medium format camera, they have a large sensor, larger than full frame. So there's a negative crop factor, meaning that focal length of your lenses is going to change in the negative way. So if it was a 50 millimeter, it may only be a 35 millimeter on a medium format. Whereas when you move to a crop sensor, it's slightly smaller than a full frame sensor. And with Nikon, it's 1.5 times crop. So if you had a 50 millimeter on a crop sensor, it would then be a 75 millimeter on a Nikon body. I think Canon is 1.6. I'm not familiar with Sony, what their crop factor is. I do know that they have full frame and crop sensor cameras. Now, if you're in the Fuji realm, Fuji is kind of the odd bird here. They only make crop sensor and medium format. So they have everything under and over full frame. So they have yet to make a full frame camera. I think they've made some more point and shooty type style that have like a full frame style sensor or something like that, or some type of experimental camera, but nothing that you're going to go on B&H or Adorama and buy, right now.